Call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you to join us. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Kolpak. Here. Pepcorn.
Here.
Preston. Here. Strand.
Here.
Mahoney.
Here. Health. August is National Breastfeeding Month, a time dedicated to highlighting the importance of breastfeeding and making note of the valuable resources in the community. Fargo Cast Public Health provides breastfeeding support through a number of programs, including WIC, Back to Work Mom, and the Nurse Family Partnership. Library. The August Jigsaw Puzzle Social and Swap is August 19th at the Downtown Main Library starting at 9 a.m. Beginning yoga sessions for adults are Thursdays at 6 p.m. through the summer at Carlson Library. Water treatment plant. The contractor has started painting the mural on the vertical section of the steel tank in the new downtown water tower. The new tower is being scheduled to be operational ahead of this winter and will replace the 3 oldest towers in the water system with a single larger tower. The new tower will improve the performance of the whole Fargo drinking water distribution system for both summer and winter operation. A series of capital improvements for drinking water storage and pumping have been made since 2005, and a $2.81 million grant from North Dakota State Water Commission has helped to pay for the downtown water tower project. And is it coming up, Katie? Wow. Got a little ways to go there on your water tower there, Commissioner Kolpak. Any other sides, or that's it?
That's it.
You haven't made much progress over the weekend, huh? Okay, good, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carried. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the July 24th, 2023 regular meeting and the July 31st, 2023 special meeting? Is there a second?
Second, and I have some additional comments, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
So the things I want to point out is we basically voted to double the city tax and utilities, and so we took no public comment. So that's the first thing that I think is very troubling. What that tax is a regressive tax, and it puts a bigger burden on low-income housing, on houses than high-income individuals. We just completed a housing study saying we have to have more low-income housing, more workforce housing, et cetera. And so it seems to me we're sending mixed messages. We're raising the cost of housing, and actually with your proposed budget, we're also going to propose raising the mill levy when if we were truly interested in reducing the cost of housing, we would be reducing taxes, we would be reducing the mills. So to me, I'm confused.
Commissioner Pepcorn, point of order. This is just a correction of the minutes. We are going to have a discussion on the budget, and you're welcome to have the discussion when we have the budget discussion. But the minutes only reflect the minutes were done.
So, Mr. Chair,
Unless you have a correction
if
to
I
the
may
minutes,
continue, Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
I am commenting on the minutes of the quote-unquote special meeting where we had to have an emergency to raise taxes. So can I continue with my comments, or would you like me to stop?
We're having a budget discussion. You can do any comments at that time. That'd be more appropriate.
Well, I just want to make sure that it goes into the record, that the minutes will reflect that there were no public comment, and what was approved 4-1 was the city fees was 2%, and that's raised to 4%. And once again, we took no public comment. And many, many times I hear how important it is we listen to the public, we listen to the people. But unfortunately, we didn't have time to do that this time, correct?
No, you're incorrect, because when we did, the Public Service Commission does meet, has a 60-day waiting period. It does a discussion, and the public is invited to speak. We're going to have a public hearing of the budget in September as well, and the public is invited to speak. We have been getting emails from different people on this particular issue, and we have been hearing them. But the Public Service Commission has a 60-day waiting period before that would even take effect. So they have an opportunity to listen to the public. There's public hearings at that time, and we will have a public hearing in this chamber to listen to the people.
I'm looking forward to that because I've never encountered, as long as I've been a city commissioner, unanimous opposition to a tax increase. I've never had, every comment that I've had, I haven't had one person in the positive, so that's very impressive. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I would remind you, Commissioner, you and all the commissioners were discussing the franchise fee increase before that meeting. Because of a tragedy in our community, we were unable to discuss it 2 weeks before. We brought it as an informative meeting. And again, it's got a public hearing session for the next 60 days.
Mr. Chairman, I call for question.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 46?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any corrections, discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Strand,
Yes.
Preston,
Aye.
Kolpak,
Aye.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye. There are no resident comments tonight, so we will go, maybe we could go the update of the 10th and University Corridor Drive study. Tom, are you ready for that?
Good evening, Commissioners. Excited to be here tonight to talk about this important project. As you know, for over a year now, we've been looking at this this corridor, working with our partners at MetroCog and the North Dakota DOT, as well as our consultant, led by Mike Bittner with Bolton and Mink, to evaluate the corridor on University Drive and 10th Street from 13th Avenue South to 19th Avenue North. During that time, there's been extensive evaluation of the operations of the corridor, as well as, I would say, pretty considerable public outreach. So Mike with Bolton and Mink will be leading the presentation tonight, coming over here to do so. But we will have staff here as well if there are any questions by commission. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mike. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our study area for this particular project did include the 6 miles of University Drive and 10th Street from 19th Avenue North all the way to 13th Avenue South. And this is a pretty extensive corridor study area that encompasses 6 miles. And when you have a study area this large, you do end up with lots of different environments or ecosystems that you travel through. So on the north and south, we have a lot of nice neighborhoods through downtown. We traverse through downtown in the central area. And then also we have campus and our event centers on the north end. So all of these different environments really help to contribute to a pretty unique corridor project that did require lots of different styles of analysis and considerations. So we started with 2 distinct phases. The first was to establish the corridor vision. So trying to look at this as the 2 corridors holistically together. And then phase 2, which we haven't started yet, but we're looking for your blessing to advance into with a couple of different ideas, is to start to look at some of those more micro items. You know, where are we crossing? How are we crossing? What are the specifics of this intersection or that intersection? As we look at this corridor, it's pretty unique in the fact that it is one of the most multimodal areas in the entire city, just behind downtown. As we look at walking, biking, and transit, we see this is more than double than the rest of our community on an average. We have 3,600 kids enrolled at 9 schools within 1/2 mile of the study corridors. At any given time, we have 1,800 bikes on NDSU campus. And by 2025, there are certain sections of University Drive that will move as many as 19 buses an hour. As we started to dive into what the key issues were that we wanted to resolve, safety really moved to the top of the list. 12% of our citywide ped bike crashes occur along this corridor. 7 of our top 10 crash rate intersections are also within our study area, 6 of them occurring on University Drive. 23% we have a 23% higher angled crash rate. And this has a lot to do with a lot of driveways and a lot of site issues as you're trying to turn onto the corridor. One of the biggest comments we got from the public was the speeding. And so as you look at the average speeds compared to the posted, which is 30 miles per hour, it's pretty close to in line. However, we did find quite a few anomaly speeds during the off-peak periods where people were moving quite a bit above the posted speed limit. We also looked at regional utility, and this is where we kind of started to really understand and appreciate these two corridors in a little bit different manner than when we started. You typically look at these roads independently, but they're really working in tandem. And so by just simply adding the two traffic volumes of the two corridors, which are really working as one combined arterial, what we found is that these two corridors in combination move more traffic than all but 45th Street by I-94 or 52nd Avenue by I-29. We also see on the north end, we have events that can generate 40 to 140% more traffic, and we also expect some growth just related to lots of new development in and throughout the downtown and northern segments. Our goal as we embarked upon this study, really guided by both the city and MetroCog, was to have the type of corridor study that was, revolutionary in terms of engagement. We wanted it to be the most robust effort that we had seen for a corridor study, recognizing all the different stakeholder interests along these two routes. So we went up and down the road, both roads, visited 600 residential properties, 60 businesses. We had 31 focus groups and 7 stakeholder interviews with some of the higher order folks along the corridor. We sent out 6,400 postcards and had 500 online comments. And just aggregating one of the takeaways, the survey, we found that the top priorities that we heard from the public was number one, efficient movement of people and goods, cars and trucks. And a lot of this came from the conversations that, the intent of the study wasn't merely just to look at conversion feasibility. Will we turn it from one way to two way? But just about everyone we talked to, or at least 3/4 of the people we talked to, came to that question or discussion point. Are you converting it? Should you convert it? And so a lot of folks, particularly on the north and south ends, were a little concerned about how they'd be able to move. And so that really came through in some of our survey results. We also got minimizing the potential for severe crashes, making sure people of all abilities feel safe walking along or crossing the street, and maintaining or increasing tree cover and green space. So as part of the process, the visioning process, we did want to look at really what the whole canvas would look like, the whole corridor. And one thing that came up, like I said, with about 3/4 of the public was related to conversion, and it was also identified in a couple of previous studies. And so first we tested this without roadway widening. So if we could just change the striping, the signals, the signing, what would happen? Well, in the north and south ends, we only have 2 lanes. And so you'd be flipping it without a 2-way left turn lane. And what we found is that this increased our travel times between 8 to 20 minutes longer to major destinations along the corridor, downtown, campus. A lot of the challenges came from the lack of a left turn lane. Also, we have bus stops that's going to gridlock traffic. We have parcel drop off, garbage pickup, tree trimming. Probably the most challenging effort, though, was that we couldn't get 50% of the traffic that is currently using it onto the corridor using our computer models because it just wasn't efficient enough to move them. And so they would be pushed to more local routes or collector streets. It's also very difficult to find a gap in traffic once you start to convert it. So we deemed that technically infeasible on the north and south sides. And so we decided, well, let's test this with the 2-way conversion with a center turn lane. This will help improve the efficiency. You can pull those left turns off. And it did improve it quite a bit. Still quite deficient in terms of typical NDDOT standards. But the bigger issue that occurred when we did this was on the north and south segment, we would widen the corridor. And in doing so, we would impact 125 trees, 175 signal lights or poles, and it cost about $17 million. It also has some pretty significant safety implications with both of the conversions while reducing the speeds, which would be beneficial. So overall, both of those concepts really didn't match the feedback we had been receiving from the public on what their priorities were. There was one conversion concept that did help support some of that vision, and that was a conversion just through downtown. And if you look at just the top of the screen, kind of that purple area is what we consider downtown, the area that we have 3 lanes existing today. And what this allows us to do is just give us a little bit extra space to be able to have 3 lanes and convert it in the same fashion that you've done in the past on NP and First. And so we can have a one-way pair all the way through the corridor, except in downtown, you still carry those 2 lanes, and then you have that reverse lane for circulation. And so we propose to carry that concept forward into the next phase of more detailed analysis. And so as we look towards the future, our first step is going to be just gathering a little bit more feedback on what we've done to date, getting any public comments. Then we'll start to look at that more detailed alternative analysis, alternative assessment in the winter, moving into next spring with a more robust engagement strategy once we have lots of alternatives for people to say, I like this, I don't like that, let's try this. And then moving into an implementation plan about a year from now. And so just to tease up what that next phase could look like, I wanted to bucket 3 different styles of concepts to get your brain thinking, see if you have any different ideas or help guide us through this process. First and foremost was traffic calming. That was something we heard from lots of folks. But also as we look through downtown, if we're willing to convert that from a 2x1, what if we use that lane for something different? We don't have bike facilities that stretch through this area, or maybe it's a bus turnout. Maybe we just tighten that right away up so we can cross a little bit easier. But also looking at speed reduction measures outside of downtown, and then targeting enforcement insights. We'd also look at enhancing or creating a little bit more robust crossing situation. So if we've got crashes occurring at traffic signals, how can we improve the safety at the traffic signals? Can we add new crossings, new beacons, new different styles of crosswalks to help improve people getting across the street, or even looking at different styles that we can at existing locations? And then finally, other opportunities. On the south end in particular, we don't have any bike facilities. We also don't have the right of way to just add them. So do we look at off-system improvements? There's a lot of accesses and challenging site triangles at intersections. So trying to improve safety, looking to work through event management, and then also trying to improve transit stops. So with that concludes kind of where we are today. We're about halfway through. Just a big kudos to MetroCog and the city for providing fabulous guidance throughout this entire process. And we're eager to take what we've learned to date and all the feedback and start to transition that into a little bit more alternatives as we move into the future.
Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Preston?
So Mike, was there a rationale for defining the downtown only up to 4th Avenue North? It seems like up to 7th would have been a logical place.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that. Maybe we should use different terminology. It's not land use based. It was kind of based on where we had that 3 lanes of space. We did start with 7th, but that's not where we have all 3 of those lanes on both of the corridors. And so it's trying to look at where the cross section changed in that middle point to be able to accommodate that conversion, but agreed that that is not necessarily what you constitute as your downtown. And that's not how we'll treat the land use considerations and how we'd accommodate that. So maybe there's a better term we should look at for that. Downtown only concept maybe.
But that's where you're talking about the 2-way conversion from 4th Avenue. And what was the southern boundary?
2nd Avenue South. Kind of where you drop and add the lanes there at the south as well.
Okay.
Commissioner Strand?
Thank you. This is really interesting, and I can't wait to hear what the people think. Diagonal crosswalks, are we considering that at all, where you can diagonally cross as well as corner to corner?
Typically called a pedestrian scramble, where you basically just have one phase and you go every different direction, right? So as part of our next phase, those are the types of concepts. And I did show an example of a project I worked on in the past on University in Grand Forks, where we looked at something like that. It's, there's certain metrics we want to look at is, do we have enough people crossing? And I think campus is a good spot to start asking some of those questions. And then we can look at the pros and cons, but that'll be part of the next phase, absolutely.
And my next thought or question is regarding left turns. We see it on Broadway a lot, where a left turning vehicle can back traffic up for blocks. And yet in the world of traffic, for example, FedEx and UPS, to my knowledge, have eliminated left turns, and it dramatically increases their efficiency. Are we considering eliminating left turns as much as possible?
One of the most challenging elements of the 2 corridors is the number of driveways we have along the corridor. And a lot of those are so essential to, some of them are directly into a home or an alleyway or whatever it happens to be. That's going to be one of the biggest challenges as we get into the next phase, because a lot of the access density is creating a lot of our crash potential because it's hard to see and there's so many access points. And so to be able to eliminate those left turns, we need to properly accommodate access to those locations. And so as we look at that next phase, again, we'll come back to how we can do that, how we can improve safety, and then, tangentially or within the same token, be able to look at that efficiency as well.
And Mayor, if I might, and then I'll wrap it up. I really appreciate the center portion of that, the downtown component versus the north and the south components. It would integrate so well conceivably with our other conversions, with our bringing over traffic from Main Avenue up under the 10th Street one-way bridge and heading east on First Avenue North. I think that would really make a lot of sense because I don't know that I haven't met a single human being who regrets we got rid of one-ways downtown. I'm not sure about the north end or the south end, but I think it could really fit well conceivably in that area.
Thank you, Mike.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask.
Mr. Preston?
one more question. So I was a little bit surprised to see the number of schools along this route, and none of them are going to be where the two-way conversion actually happens. Wondering about whether there's some guidance from the Safe Routes to Schools study that was done a while back to try to enhance the safety for kids to walk or bike. I watch kids biking to, I'm thinking it's Carl Ben, not Carl Ben, I'm sorry, the one up north, whatever it is.
Roosevelt.
Roosevelt, yeah. And then the middle school further up north too. Watch them biking there all the time, and I wonder if, with this next phase, if you will be looking at really trying to improve the safety routes to school.
Yeah, we'll use those as feedback, absolutely, or kind of a starting point, to really find the right locations that we can improve those crossings and figure out, how to make it a little bit better on each of those instances. So yeah, that's exactly the point of this next phase.
Okay.
But we want to ask some of those tougher early questions before we started to figure out exactly where we drop in different styles of improvement. So really eager to hear what the public says on different ideas and styles and locations as we move to that next phase.
Any other discussion? Thank you. Tom, we need no vote on this, right? The information only? Thank you.
Correct.
We'll go to public hearing number 48, special assessments for maintenance of Skyway system. Steve Sprague to explain.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight for the Skyway, we're looking at our annual assessment. We are increasing this slightly over last year. Last year we were at $100,000 and this year we're going up to $130,000. This covers the heating, cooling, cleaning, some of those general maintenance type things. And then we're also looking at new wall coverings in the Skyway. They're getting a little bit tired. If you have any other questions?
Any questions? Steve Sprague? Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this assessment? Anyone present want to speak? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Colpack.
Aye.
Strand.
Yes.
Preston.
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye. Item 49, special assessment of nuisance abatement fees. Steve Sprague to explain as well.
And this list, Mayor, includes mowing, snow removal, Dutch elm disease removal, code enforcement items, things like that. And we've had another healthy list. Now, this list is prepared at the end of May, and then we provide notice to the people that have been getting an invoice. And so we anticipate that before we actually do the assessment, some of these will get paid off.
Is there anyone present wish to speak to this nuisance abatement? Anyone present wish to speak? If not, we'll close public hearing. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Steve, can I just ask a question on dog waste? What is that? Is it somebody's yard got a lot of dog waste and we go out and clean
That's
it up?
exactly, it is new this year. See, the health department did that one and provided it to us. And again, that's similar to mowing and snow removal. It is complaint driven. So if somebody, a neighbor, had a number of dogs and didn't pick up after themselves, they call the health department. Health department sends somebody out to take care of it.
And then did I hear during snow seasons, sidewalk is up in numbers? It used to be like 500 and it's almost 1,600 now? People?
I'd have to go to Ben to get the exact numbers, but yes, we're seeing quite a bit more in the calling, the complaint driven.
People like to have their sidewalks cleared, okay?
Well, it's I walk to work, right? And I know Commissioner Preston walks a lot. And so when you're trudging through knee-deep snow from the blizzards that we had this last year, you give them a couple of days and then it's really, it's time to get it done.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Colpack.
Aye.
Preston. Strand.
Yes.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye. Item 51, update on the House Bill 1340 firearms. Lane McLean to explain.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ian McLean. I'm an Assistant City Attorney with the City of Fargo. Here to give a quick update on the city's declaratory judgment action regarding House Bill 1340, which was recently passed. Oops. Thank you. So to give a little background first, so the city has home rule ordinances, or actually home occupation ordinances. The purpose is to intend to permit residents to work from other homes. So for instance, like a piano teacher is allowed to run a commercial business out of her home. At the same time, the ordinances are meant to also protect the neighborhood for public health, safety, and welfare, and also to make sure it's not a detriment to the character and the livability of the neighborhood. So to further that, the city of Fargo prohibits 6 home occupations currently. So it's vehicle and large equipment repair, dispatch centers, you can't have a mortuary in your home, animal care, grooming and boarding, adult establishments, and why we're here, the sale of firearms and ammo. So in 2021, the legislature passed House Bill 1248, which was an attempt to basically void the city's home occupation ordinances prohibiting you from being able to sell firearms out of your home. The city filed a declaratory judgment action. And what a declaratory judgment action is you're asking the court to declare the rights of the party. So in this case, to construe the state statute versus the city's ordinances. So the city filed that in Cass County District Court, and the city won in 2021. So that brings us to 2023. The legislature passed House Bill 1340, which is now a second attempt to void the city's ordinances. The primary purpose, I think, of 1340 was sort of to tighten up the language that lacked in 1248 in response to the lawsuit that the city prevailed in. But HB 1340 also goes further in one important aspect, which is how it affects the city's the home rule charter. So a home rule charter is essentially a local constitution that cities and counties pass to govern themselves, and it's passed by the citizens. So the citizens of Fargo in 1970 passed a home rule charter for the city. And within that, it has certain powers that the city is allowed to exercise. It comes from the Constitution, which essentially says the state must allow cities to have home rule charters. And the purpose is to provide for the maximum local self-government of the localities. So in the city of Fargo, we've had our home rule charter since 1970. We've exercised those powers throughout the last 50 plus years. And essentially what HB 1340 is trying to do is go back to our home rule charter and say, yeah, you've adopted these powers, you've implemented them through ordinances, but we're now going to take powers out of your home rule charter. So that creates a slippery slope. So on the face, this lawsuit might seem like it's about whether someone can sell firearms out of their home. It really has a much larger purpose, which is if they can take away this home rule power, where does it stop? So the city has commenced a complaint that they filed litigation in Cass County District Court on August 1st. We're essentially requesting that the court find that the state cannot strip away the home rule powers previously adopted and exercised, and that our ordinances are still in effect. So we're working with the Attorney General's office and trying to get this briefed and in front of the judge as soon as possible. I think even the court system moving fast might seem moving slow in the real world, but hopefully we can get a decision by year end. Any questions?
Any questions of the commission? It's a good review. Thank you for doing that and getting in front of judges, district judge, or where do we go? Which judge?
We'll start with the district court judge, and then whatever party does not prevail would have the right to appeal that to the North Dakota Supreme Court.
Okay, thank you. Item 52, recommendation to adopt resolution establish procedure for issuance of additional liquor license. Steve Sprague to explain.
Good evening again. So in June 26th, this body set the estimated population at 131,000. That action then triggered the availability or issuance of 2 additional liquor licenses, one being a Class Z license, which is probably a common definition would probably be like a street bar. There's full alcohol. There's no requirement on a Z to sell any food or anything like that. And then the other is a B Limited, which is an off-sale license. We went back to the Liquor Control Board, and they asked that we move forward with the advertising of the availability of these licenses. And so Nancy recommended that we come to the City Commission with the steps that we would be going through to issue these licenses. So what we're going to do is advertise the availability of these licenses for the next couple of months. We'll have a date of October 27th at 4 p.m. When any applications would need to be filed. At that time, we'll go through any applications with our normal process, and they'd be reviewed by building inspections, health, auditors, fire, and police. When we have the background checks and all of our information back, we'd go back to the Liquor Control Board, and any licenses that were recommended, all licenses would come forward with a recommendation from Liquor Control of either approve or deny. And then the City Commission would make their determination based on the interests of public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. And then there's also a list of condition or considerations to make, which would be location to other alcohol establishments or location close to a church or a school, those types of things. So then the City Commission can make a finding on any of the applications that we've received that we've considered appropriate. And then if the number of licenses would exceed the number of applications exceed the number of licenses we have available, we would have a drawing per Fargo Municipal Code. So looking for a motion to move forward with that.
Can we put the motion up on the screen? You don't have it? Okay. So it basically to move to approve the attached resolution, which the resolution is in our packet,
Yes.
which is 3-4 pages long, just so the commissioners know. Can I have a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Colpack.
Aye.
Strand.
Yes.
Preston.
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye. Next item is 52, recommend to approve the mayor's preliminary budget and set a public hearing date for Monday, September 18, 2023 at 5:15. What I chose to do, I did give a presentation to you last week. I'm going to give you a smaller version today to try to address some of the issues that have come up for the commissioners and the commission this last week. Number one, the operational objectives remain the same. It's to retain and recruit Team Fargo, to optimize service charge revenues with the city services provided, to explore and identify revenue options, diversify and collaborate, to seek efficiencies and cost savings wherever we may find them, and safety, fire station number 8 and the traffic police officers, and finally, to advance the Fargo Dome expansion plans to the public. Now, the commissioners did meet with me, and we did talk about pre-existing conditions leading to the 224 budget. And when we considered all the requests, operating personnel and capital, the budget team began with a nearly 13 million differential between revenues and expenses for 2024. Every expense line item and request were evaluated and reduced whenever possible while still funding city operations. We had over requests for 66 personnel, which was cut back to 22. That process reduced request expenses by 6.3 million, a gap of still 6.63 million, which was communicated directly to city commissioners over several meetings. This is the first budget followed by CARES and ARP funding. The actual costs of some expenditures operating personnel were masked as a result of infusion of federal funds over the last 3 years. The federal funds provided an additional 2 years of alternate revenues, which otherwise would have necessitated a mill increase or other alternative revenues to fund those operations in the last 2 years. Now is the time to address the reality that these funds would end and look at revenue streams that support the governmental operations for us as a regional leader. The budget team worked diligently to right-set the proposed 2023 general fund to be in line with structural revenues and structural expenses to create a sustainable path for 2024 and beyond. At a cabinet meeting, I told all directors where we were headed. We had meetings frequently with them, and the budget team has worked over the last 4 months to bring things into line. This is also to avoid the one-time usage of sales of property, which is sometimes placed in a budget as a possibility of revenue. Nearly 75% of general fund funds personnel, wages, and benefits, with over 40% of those salary expenses are dedicated to Fargo Police and Fire. Over the last few years, the Fargo wrapped up and filled police vacancies by implementing the in-house Fargo PD Academy, increased wages, and allowing for jumps and steps in wages. And it is anticipated that Fargo PD will be fully staffed because of these actions in 2024. The 2024 budget also proposes adding an additional 6 grant-funded officers to address the community concerns about street racing and other traffic-related issues. The 2024 budget proposed hiring 15 new firefighters in an innovative staggered approach to staff the new fire station number 8. This was a commission priority to ensure South Fargo had fire protection within the standard response time that are required in an ISO certified fire department, and we're around 7 minutes. We're under 6.30 seconds, I think, Chief, right? That's our goal. That's your goal. So 2024 proposed budget is laser focused on community safety with a personnel request. Is laser focused all on operating, significantly limit new spending and focus on existing core services. And capital, we had through capital over and over, we brought it to nominal increases, largely inflationary related. General fund expenses you see up in the chart. Where it says salary 6.2%, that's of the overall growth. Actually, the COLA that we give our employees is 2%. The county is giving 5%. West Fargo might give 4%. We're giving the minimal COLA we give our great staff, and 30% of our people are fixed in their salary. When we get down to actually increase the budget is 7.5%. Operating expenses are a reflection of inflation, contracts, other items that we have in the city that are fixed, and the fixed costs go up for us, we have to cover them. Next slide. When we look at the general fund revenue, where we left to look, it's actually property taxes, 2 mills, and it's franchise fees. That brings us, again, the total increase in fund revenue is only 7.5%. Next slide. If you look at a graph, a pie graph to 2023 versus 2024, you can see a nominal increase in the side of the graph. Our capital expenses are 0.4, it's been keeping that way, and our operating expenses went up to 24.3%, which is a reflection of inflation and the other factors we're dealing with. When we look at this, our average homeowner, it's approximately $145 annually, or $12 a month. Basically, the amount of money it takes to fill in your car twice. I'm going to have Susan Thompson come up and go through the budget with you. Transparency is important. I want the public to understand what has transpired. We worked very hard. This is one of the most challenging budgets we've had, but we want long-term sustainability and long-term predictability for the public of what type of service they expect to have and how we can direct to keep our costs down as much as possible. Susan will go through what the budget team went through with Mike Redlinger was helping as well, and what we went through as a team and where we brought the expenses. Susan?
Hello. The intent of this slide is to kind of consolidate 4 months worth of chronology into one slide to sort of show you the processes that we go through when we're doing the budget. So the first column, we start with last year's budget. The second column, we make adjustments that we know are pretty reliable based on historic trending. So we do that on the revenues, which are on top. And then on the bottom, We look at things that we know are going to happen with personnel expenses primarily. In this case, many of our employees get an annual step. Unless you're capped at that, that's typically about 2%. We also had the PERS increase from the legislature that we needed to factor in. And then the final thing was our health insurance premiums that we really have no control over. So we programmed that in. And if you look at that second column, kind of right away we were underwater, about $1 million. So that was, way back this spring. So then our department heads started looking at their budgets. In addition to that, the budget team was looking at ways to address other personnel issues, the cost of living adjustment that was programmed in at 2%, and then the longevity pay incentive that Jill had mentioned, and I believe the mayor talked about last week as an incentive to our staff. That is column 3. And then we gathered all of the department requests for personnel and operating. That was a total of $10 million. So then we get to the column that has the negative 12. That is assuming we make no adjustments to kind of those revenue estimates, and we look at what everybody asked for on their request list. So that's really where kind of the work starts for the budget team. We look through all of the requests, and we actually look through things that they didn't maybe request a change for and say, we've been carrying this budget line and it hasn't actually been spent. That would be better adjusted down to allow other budgetary monies to be spent elsewhere. And then we looked at the capital expense. So when we then added the base new 24, the personnel, and then what was approved, we were at 120 million of expense, and we still had that 113 of revenue. So that was a negative 6.6. So we had to look at, we've scraped through the expenses. How do we address the revenues, in order to continue the services at the level that we've been providing and maintain the staff at the levels that we have. So in doing a lot of math and different iterations, that's where in the tax line it includes both the property tax increase and the franchise fee increase. So that is kind of the summary of 4 months or so and 12 different iterations of the budget process.
Mike, do you have any other comment?
Well, good evening, Commissioners. I would just add a couple of comments. One is that this is a real methodical look. We thought this would be of value and interest to the Commissioners just to show that chronology, that there was a lot of thoughtfulness that went into this process. And I would just really support what Susan just shared with you, is that this has been a dynamic budget. There's been a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces, but I just want to really fully understand that there's been a lot of expenditure scrubbing from the beginning of this process all the way to the end, as well as the evaluation of revenue. So a very thoughtful approach. Just want to acknowledge Susan, Jordan, the finance team for really helping us out within the budget team on this chronology. So I thought this was a helpful slide. Thank you.
And we may come back to this at the end if you have questions. It was brought to me, what if we didn't do any additional mills and no changes to the franchise fees? Further reduction in operating budgets would include funding for staff would be required. Fargo Fire Station number 8 would not open as there would be no staff to support it. That would bring stagnation to their city. No new growth in operating expenses, no additional employees, and no capital expenditures. The 2024 budget would still require an increase in revenue to fund existing employee pay step increases and mandated employer-paid retirement match, which is already committed by this commission. This does not even take into account any of the contractual requirements for maintenance service contracts, subscribers, software, et cetera, which is a considered expense. We would have to deal into the reserve fund, which is at 21 million right now, and if you continue to take away from that, that threatens our bond rating and it threatens our ability as a city to function with having enough reserve to cover for emergencies. Fargo is not unique at looking at different ways to fund its operations in light of inflation, incredibly low unemployment, and rising service demands. On the same weekend that the Fargo Editorial Board called on Fargo to rein in the spending and demonstrate fiscal stewardship, It also ran 3 stories calling for Fargo to do more on efforts to reduce homelessness, seek operational options for affordable housing, and offer further training to those who serve alcohol. This, in addition to the forum's call over the last several months for more investment in public safety, increased crime in downtown Fargo, street racing, and Fargo PD staffing challenges, seems like it's quite ironic. If you want great service in a great community, it does cost money. Again, let's go back to that citywide travel cost. At the beginning of COVID, we did not know what was going to happen, and citywide training and travel costs were slashed in half to 50% across the board. We have still not returned to the pre-COVID levels in funding our staff, although our staff has grown, and there are important many things that they need to go to complete their training. The cabinet has been fully briefed on the need for the conservative, and over $500,000 in operating costs were reduced through the line-by-line review by the finance team. Fargo has always been looked upon as a regional leader, but there are costs of all these efforts, and we are accounting for those costs with the 2024 budget. We did also look into a property tax assistance, as some people are in fixed income and have difficulty in paying these expenses. We do have a low-income home energy assistant program. When you talk to PCS, they told us about these. We have PSC, I'm sorry. A Lifeline provides discounted home or cell phone service for eligible participants. Homestead tax credit was increased in the amount of money that you can make as income and ability for people to take and participate in that. We have over $130 million in property that is covered under homestead tax credit. So there are many people in our community that take part in that. And we also have ND Help for Homeowners can assist in many different expenses. We truly are thinking about those with fixed income and would like them to take advantage of these. When we talked to the Public Service Commission, they said many times the public does not take part in these. Next slide. The budget was a little pushed because of the tragedy we had in our community. It was 2 weeks ago that we did want to discuss franchise fees. It was bumped because of elements that happened, and we tried to do a presentation to the commission in a timely fashion. Fortunately, we had a 60-day notice to get around as well. So the reason it was presented at last meeting at Monday was just to get it to the commissioners so they would know that. There is a public hearing that we will have on the budget, which the public is more than welcome to talk and visit up all the things and concerns. The Public Service Commission will also have public hearings as well for the public to talk to at that point. We have just put in that we're going to increase our franchise fees, but the state still has to act on it. And at that, I'd stand for questions. The motion suggested is to approve the 2024 preliminary budget and schedule a public hearing for final budget on Monday, September 18, 2023 at 5:15. The public be knowing that if we did want to go down 2 mills at the next meeting, we could do that because this is in essence a preliminary budget, but I can't add it on. After this date, we couldn't add mills. So the reason you have the 2 mills in now is that's the highest it can be, but if a public wanted it to go lower, then it'd have to be lowered by the commission. I stand for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make the recommended motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. And then
Discussion?
Yeah.
Mr. Preston?
So I'm a little bit confused. Does this taxes line, does that include the additional 2 mills that were brought up at the last meeting?
Yes.
And so there's been some allocation of those 2 mills on the expense side. Can you explain where they are, Michael?
I think I'll have Mike answer that. Okay?
I'm sorry?
I'll have Mike answer that.
Thank you, Commissioner Preston, for the question. So we'll pull up that information right there. So yes, your mills, as well as the placeholder for the franchise fees, have been allocated in a preliminary budget. So the good thing that we have now is the time to talk about the rest of those elements of that budget. So we're required to establish in a couple of days, 3 days from now, what that ceiling will be for our mill levy for 2024. And so we can show that we tie that back out to both the operating expenses as well as our personnel expenses. And then we've also got the detail in the capital that's been provided. The piece that the mayor just mentioned about the mills is that this is a not to exceed number. So when we establish the preliminary mills, we cannot go above that. So our 57 as proposed cannot go to 58, for example, or 59 after this meeting date. That is a fixed date in Century Code. And so then after that, we will also, as I said last week, provide some additional detail on what those franchise fees and the mills will look like in terms of our public safety investments. We talked last week extensively about community safety. We were talking about everything from not only helping our police department, our fire department, we also had some miscellaneous requests from, for example, the Public Works Department for crowd management solutions like jersey barriers. And so what I would like to do, and I mentioned this last week, is come back then after we get through our budget process and then talk about, and as well as we reach the conclusion of the grant process with the Department of Justice on the COPS grant, we will then know how we ended up on that grant. We will also then be able to tell you in even a little bit more detail about where the rest of the millage will go for public and community safety. So we're just going to want to ask for a bit of time to do that. Again, knowing that we're still tentative on the Department of Justice grant, we're actively pursuing it. We are now effectively 2 months away from learning the outcome of that grant. And so there will be additional conversation with the commission at that time.
So 2 more questions. Explain what the ABCD is, and were those allocations included in the expense side? And then the second question is, or I guess this is more of a statement, I really feel uncomfortable in doing a final budget approval without knowing what's happening with these 2 mills specifically. Can the time frame be moved so that before we actually have the final vote, that we know where these 2 mills are actually going?
Yes, no, thank you for that question. So the schedule, and actually if we could start on the schedule first, then I'll turn it over to Susan on the other question about what A, B, C, D, and E mean. So just on your schedule, when you look at that approval on October 7, or on October 2 rather, that's going to be really, really close to us learning the outcome of the public safety grant with the Department of Justice. So I was certainly committed to getting that information as early as we can. If we can learn that information even before October 2, that'd be great, but I don't have that information yet. And I don't believe I'm going to have it on, say, September 20th or September 25th. But that said, what we can do is show you exactly where we tie out at that time if we were to be successful and receive all 6 grant-funded positions, where our matches and where we would allocate other funds. If we were unsuccessful, then we will know probably shortly after that adoption date, and then we will show you a slight revision to that. And that was my comment last week, to allow the commission an opportunity to reopen that conversation. We just need to be really careful with the Department of Justice and the federal grant requirements that we not supplant their dollars today. So we're actively pursuing that grant and just allocating those dollars elsewhere. We'll revisit, obviously, if we are not successful with that grant and see what we need to do. But for the time being, we want to fully allocate to a balanced budget the mills and the franchise fees. So happy to provide additional detail. And as I said last week, I can almost picture a 1-page summary of about 12, 13, 14 different items that we would be happy to provide to the commission.
Okay.
And then Susan, I'm going to ask for some help on the question. This is really great work just about what ABC refers to.
A, B, C, D are my notes in case you asked what those were. So maybe if I didn't put the notes, you wouldn't have asked. But now that they're there, we'll talk about it. It was basically to explain of those approvals what we did approve and what some of the rationale was. So A relates to personnel, and as we mentioned, we had $7.2 million of requests, and we funded the net of 1.3. So that was, as we showed in the slide last week, it was the full firefighters for Station 8. Those are added gradually, though, so that doesn't reflect a full year. It's the funds for the grant match for the police, which is the equivalent of 2 officers, 1 information services desk attendant that helps out kind of all of us. The money that harm reduction has been spending but had not been put in the budget before, had been paid out of other funds. And then we do estimate some salary savings because, as I said, the way we have to budget, we have to assume every single person works every day, which we know isn't realistic. And to budget that would be saying no to other things. So that is the net of that. B is the operating expenses, the requests that people made. Of the 3.1, we funded 2.7. Most of that was inflationary increases on supplies and things. But I'll just have a quick mention on the supplies that was mentioned in the forum report about the $600,000. Of that, $355,000 was supplies, straight price increases for our street department. It also included PPE and uniforms for the new firefighters and the new police officers. So a huge chunk of that was, pretty easily explained. The second operating are the items that I went in that weren't requests that I just cut because they had been carried over and hadn't been used. And then the last item is the capital expenses.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Pepcorn.
Just a few things. First of all, I want to thank Mike I called him on Friday about the budget with the removing the mills and the utility tax increase, and I would support that budget. If we keep the mills level and we eliminate the utility tax, I would support that. And so I won't support the current budget. I think we need to reduce spending. And to give you an example, so the Downtown Engagement Center, which is across the street from here, that was started during COVID. We had federal funding for that. We were told that was needed because the Cass County Jail was not accepting people, so we had to have a place for them to go. COVID is over, the federal funding is gone, so now the Downtown Engagement Center, that's going to be paid for by the city of Fargo. It's a regional place, without a doubt, but it's just paid for by us, by the property taxes of the citizens of Fargo. That's not right. Cass County is not participating, certainly not Minnesota. The state of North Dakota isn't participating, so all that's on us. And so to me, that's obviously, there's a lot of those programs that need to be discontinued, and I don't see that at all. And so I'm in favor of keeping the mills where they are and actually doing some reduction in spending. That's what I'm looking forward to. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, we've all been through a lot in this last month or so. And after July 14th, and this is just me, I'm sitting at home and going, okay, what's my role in this? If you're an elected official and you're at the table, at the dais, what is my role in addressing these needs in our community? On July 14th, knock on wood, some of our officers are getting back home, but we were down 3 officers in one day. One day, we're down 3 officers. On a daily basis, we're hearing from our citizens, slow this traffic down, stop these speeders, these loud, noisy traffic motorcycle races have to stop. Then we have other discussions. Commissioner Pepcorn led the effort on downtown safety. None of this is free. We have a fire department that's expanding into the southern edge of the city. And, I just saw recently in Orlando where they're talking a 10+ minute response for fire. And we're at 6 or so plus. Would we trade that? Would we want to go back up to 10 minutes? Could you imagine explaining to the public how we're not taking care of our jobs and keeping them safe? And it's not just fires, it's medical. 2/3 or so of their cars are medical calls. We have a fire station expansion. We have a public health program that's getting national notice, because the more we do through our harm reduction, the more we do through our public health, the more we do through our mobile outreach, the less that's on the shoulders of our law enforcement, and that's not their skill set. They're the first to tell you they can't arrest us out of addiction. We're receiving hundreds of people. So I started thinking, okay, what is my role? What's my position in this? Nobody wants to raise taxes, but we're in a growing community. We have expanding, growing needs. Are we going to pay attention to those needs? Are we going to listen to the people or not and address their basic fundamental desire for safety? I think it's on us to do this. So I surveyed people, unofficially asking people, what do you think of this? Would you support a 2 mil increase if it was dedicated for public safety, for law enforcement, for public health, harm reduction, and substance abuse, and for fire? Everybody says, absolutely, I'd support it. I'd say it'd be about a pizza a month to cost to your budget. Said, no problem. I can tell you this, the cost will be more if we don't do it. If we don't provide better safety, if we don't support our police department, we will be paying more, and the cost won't be just money. So I'll take all the heat in the world for suggesting an increase in weight in the mill. I think it's our responsibility to deliver to the people what we owe them. And that's a commitment to safety. So what I would ask, though, Mike Redlinger and Susan and Mayor, is I'd like to see this 2 mills identified ongoingly throughout the year. I want us to constantly tell people how it's being used, where it's being applied, how it's being utilized, and what the roadmap is. I want the people to know exactly where every bit of it goes so they can see that we translated it into public safety and it just doesn't get blended into the budget, general fund, and lost. Because if this doesn't derive more public safety, then we've misstepped even further. Chief, I can't wait to hear your advice for what we need to do. Same with our fire department. I can't wait. I'm all ears. Learn what's the best advice of the people who are driving in those lanes, in their feet are on the ground. They're in the trenches. And then we owe them the best we can do so the people in this city, we're just a really fortunate city. Gosh, our problems are nothing compared to the rest of the world. Let's keep this going. It's going to take a little bit of an investment, yes. And yeah, taxes are not fun. But we get to do it, and for the right reasons, and we need to do it. So Mayor, I'm all for this, but I want accountability and transparency. I want the people to see we're answering their questions and requests for safety. And then we'll see how it works.
Absolutely. Commissioner Kolpak.
Thank you. First, I have a question for Michael and Susan. Perhaps can you speak to that 1.6 unallocated line item that I talked to you about earlier today first, and then I have some comments.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Kolpak. Commissioners, one line item that we this year are removing from consideration is a plug figure for unallocated. This is a historical line item that has received a plug of revenue anticipating that there would be expenditures that would not occur. And what we have found is that given how tight some of our budgets have been over the last few years, as well as some of our reductions that we've already applied to the expenditure budgets, it's not realistic. It's not plausible for us to expect that we're going to continue to produce that much savings just as a factor of underspending. And so we wanted to, as a part of our more kind of alignment to truth in budgeting this year and more transparency, remove that line item so that we were not planning on that, creating a shortfall later when it didn't appear. For example, much like, as I mentioned throughout our process, as well as on July 10th, also removing, for example, one-time sources of revenue like the sale of assets or property. Those are things that we also just want to simply remove because they're not realistic to plan for, especially when conditions may not warrant that we create that sale and that something happens. So that's same story here with unallocated. We're simply removing that to be more pure on the budget so that we're not planning for it.
Thank you. And a couple comments, and I apologize. My comments I wrote before I saw this final updated presentation, but yes, we're here and we have some difficult decisions to make, largely because of decisions that were made 3 to 4 years ago in order to keep and recruit employees to be able to do the job of running the business and services of the city of Fargo. Additionally, one of our number one jobs as a commission is public safety. And in fact, just over 40% of our personnel costs, as we just heard, which are 75% of our total operating budget, is dedicated to public safety. So decisions were made to increase the number and salaries for our police officers so we, unlike many cities struggling today, could get to and keep a fully staffed police force, as well as to build Fire Station number 8 in South Fargo. I am sure I would have also supported the decisions first made by the Position Evaluation Committee and ultimately approved by the Commission. But with those decisions, we should also have had a transparent and phased-in plan through some modeling so we understood how we would pay for the positions in a sustainable way. Recognizing that the one-time COVID federal funds masked some of the real costs, unfortunately, that modeling was not completed. Also, we've been at this budget process now for 4 months. I myself have had 8 different meetings with administration and my liaison departments to understand the needs, challenge expenses, and consider and challenge possible revenue sources. From the beginning, franchise fees and possible mill increases were talked about. We began with a $13 million gap at the start, looked at all expenses, and because of the realities of inflation, commitments to staffing increases from previous years, the need to add 15 new firefighters for Station 8 plus 6 new police officers to address traffic granted with a grant as part of that, and road safety and street safety, and we're all in a growing city. We had to look at new sources of revenues. And the final impact to an average household, albeit it's not insignificant, is $12 a month or $145 in a year of new expense. So again, as a commissioner, I take the responsibility of public safety, providing the day-to-day services to our community, and doing that within a balanced budget very seriously, and I did it with due diligence. And in that vein, I propose both cuts and revenue recommendations throughout the 4-month budgeting process we were all part of. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Kristen?
if I could just say, I'm planning to vote for this evening, but with some concerns, and 2 of them. One of them is that we don't have clarity on the additional 2 mills, so I would hope that we would have better clarity before our final vote. And also have a voice in the prioritization of that, of the spending on those 2 mills. And then secondly, and I might be getting some additional information this week about it, but there's still that hanging question out there about the general fund debt payment on the NP Avenue garage. And perhaps that will be answered for me this week, but I still haven't gotten an answer to that one. So those 2 issues in my mind. And for the sake of public transparency, I think both those questions really need to be answered.
Thank you for a thoughtful discussion. I do say that on some of the services we do provide, we will look at our partners in the county in West Fargo, Moorhead, Minnesota, to county commissions as well for some of the needs in which this community we provide for everybody. Our community has always been a caring community and trying to take care of those people who are not as fortunate, do not have the different abilities and or options that other people have. This has been a very thoughtful budget. I feel very strong that we're trying to get a sustainable budget. The 2% on the franchise fees and the 2 mills should make a sustainable budget and hopefully grow as the community grows to fit and take care of the needs. But we all know it's troubling times with inflation and different things going on. But the reality is, City of Fargo is a great city and people want great service. They want people to protect them, take care of them, safety, and do all the things that we expect on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think we can back away from that. Roll call vote, please.
Strand? Yes. Kolpak?
Aye.
Preston?
Aye.
Pepcorn?
No.
Mahoney?
Aye. Have recommendations for the Liquor Control Board. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, real quick, Mr. Chair. So Tatiana Hamilton, Steve and I interviewed her and forwarded her name on to you. She's an excellent candidate. She is a Fargo North graduate, so that's a great thing. She also is an attorney at Onstead Twitchell, and when she was in Grand Forks, she worked her way through college as a server. And so she's got experience in the area. So we're very excited to have her join us. Thank you.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just concerned that we're losing our citizen voices at the Liquor Control Board. And that's what we established, was a citizen board. Now we've had one resignation that's not real pretty, and on the heels of removing another person, not reappointing those citizens. And I'm just wondering where we're going with this committee.
So, Mr. Chair,
Pepcorn.
as far as I'm aware, they're both citizens. I think that's a requirement of being on it. And we have lots of, actually, it's kind of cool. A lot of people want to be on the Liquor Control Board, so I really appreciate that. Actually, one of the other candidates that we interviewed, Steve and I, excellent as well, and so we're going to try to find another position for him. So it's a great thing. We have a lot of interest, and we have a lot of people that want to serve. People come and go, that's how it goes, but they're all citizens. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Last thing I'll say, Mayor, maybe not last for me, but there's a reason we have updates at the end of our meetings to tell each other what's happening in our portfolios. I wouldn't mind hearing what's happening in liquor or tax incentives. These are really robust, ripe issues unfolding, and every meeting we have, we don't even get a report back to us that they're doing anything.
Mr. Chair, you're welcome to any of the meetings at any time. You can watch them anytime. We'd love to have you. If I gave you an update on all the committees, it would add another half hour to the meeting, and Lord knows they're long enough already.
Any other business? Roll call vote.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Preston,
Aye.
Colpack,
Aye.
Strand,
No.
Mahoney,
Aye. 55, applications for property tax exemptions for improvements made to building. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Colpack,
Aye.
Preston,
Aye.
Strand,
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye. Liaison Commission assignment updates. Commissioner Strand starts us off.
We didn't quite get there for this meeting, but there's a real major vetting of new candidates for the Human Rights Commission. We've had a couple members retire off the commission. One or so others have moved away, I think. And so there's 4 new candidates coming our way, and I think they're the best slate of candidates I've ever seen for the Human Rights Commission. So Dr. Hogan and Ahmed do good work. I look forward to seeing that commission get more traction through time. And I look forward to you all getting to know these new 4 members when they're appointed.
Commissioner Colpack.
Yeah, I have 3 slides today, beginning with the Fargo Fire Department update on station number 8 we've been talking about tonight. Underground plumbing began August 1st, with the installation scheduled to be completed in approximately 3 weeks. Electrical underground began August 7th, and precast walls, which are saving quite a bit of money as far as construction for the building, are scheduled for delivery September 28th, with installation completed by October 1st. So good work there. Solid Waste Department on a book recycling program update. Improved book recycling bins are at 10 drop sites throughout Fargo. And just a reminder, the preference is Fargo residents are encouraged to donate used books that are in good condition locally, such as thrift stores or used bookstores, rather than recycling them. You can learn more about this at fargorecycles.com. And the last exciting update, I have 4 slides, sorry. This update on solid waste, that's why I'm screwed up here. This is for water treatment. 2023 lead and copper testing results. So Fargo tap water has been testing for lead since 1991 in Fargo homes. Best lead results ever have been over the last 4 years, from 2020 to 2023. EPA regulations allow for 10% of samples to be above an EPA action level of 15 parts per billion, and Fargo has had no samples above that action level since 2014 sampling. Fargo Water Treatment Plant focuses on tap water pH control and adds a corrosion inhibitor to prevent lead from leaching into drinking water locally at homes. And no issues with copper in Fargo drinking water. And just a reminder, the water utility will be waiting for the official 2023 report from the North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality. These results are preliminary, and you can see the graph and the great work that's been happening. And I'll remind all citizens, Fargo had the best tasting water in the state last year.
Commissioner Colpack, can I ask a question
Sure.
about the lead testing? Is that done at the tap site or in the system?
The samples are taken, I'm looking at Director Hall. I have that background right here. In the homes,
In the
right.
homes?
And there's,
Okay.
yep, it's a number of samples. I think it's
Great.
100.
Thanks.
Thank
Do you
you.
want to check Commissioner Preston's tap water sometime, Troy?
50 samples were collected from Fargo homes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good question.
Well, our 2 police officers are out of the hospital now. Chief is very pleased to report that. We've had some interesting donations. I believe a boy in Lakota did a lemonade stand and raised $1,000 for the fund, which I find intriguing. But we've had great corporate sponsors as well donate. We've had a great outpouring of the community to help our officers, and it's very touching. I think that the team was very touched by how much outpouring of public support and love there was. So we all appreciate that very much. And the other thing I was working on is the budget, so you already have that. Commissioner Preston?
Just my last report from the Strong Towns National Meeting I went to and the Congress for New Urbanism. Go to the next slide. I'm going to just combine the last two pieces being form-based codes and the city's balance sheet, which is really more a discussion about assets. Just briefly, the form-based codes, we talked about those really briefly with our land development code evaluation report that came through probably, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And it will probably be considered when we revise the land development code. But basically, form-based codes is, it looks at what actually the building actually looks like from the outside, not necessarily dictating the use inside. So it's the whole purpose of form-based codes is really to have that perspective from the public realm. So most of the presentations at this conference were using form-based codes along corridors. So there'd be kind of a uniform approach to the interaction with the public, basically, when form-based codes are used. It's difficult to explain, so I'm going to go to the next slide. So the final piece was asset management, and that basically is any publicly owned assets, buildings, undeveloped land, brown spaces, air rights. Most of the presenters really focused on land assets and doing an inventory of public property with the intent to evaluate for highest and best use. So there were a number of communities that actually even purchased some private land or land that was in the private sector, but within the core or the city limits, and then put them out for RFPs and worked with developers to promote infill development. So it was really a way to not only probably bring some funding in from the sale of the land, but also obviously trying to establish developments that were the highest and best use, and it gets returned then in property tax revenue. So that's it, and I am done with this meeting.
Thank you. Commissioner Pipcorn? Any other business to the group? Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.